Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
In 2005, I had a 10-minute conversation at the San Jose airport that generated billions in revenue for HP. But here's what's really fascinating. 3 other HP executives heard the exact same conversation and saw nothing special about it. If you read Monday's studio notes over on Substack, you know this story from the emotional side. What it felt like to have that breakthrough moment, the internal resistance I faced, and the personal transformation that followed. Go on over and hop over and check that out. Links are in the show notes. Now today, I'm delivering on my promise I gave you to give you the complete tactical methodology behind that insight. I'm going to show you the systematic framework I call high resolution thinking and how you can train yourself to see opportunities that others totally miss. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand the 3-stage system that turns casual conversations into breakthrough innovation ideas. You'll have 9 specific methods you can practice, and you'll walk away with a week-long exercise you can start immediately. But here's what I want you to do right now. Think of one conversation you had this week where someone mentioned a frustration, a side project, or something they wish existed. Hold that in your mind. Now we're going to transform how you process that kind of information through this episode. I'm Phil McKinney. Welcome to my innovation studio, and we're going to get right into it. But before that, let me establish why this matters. That airport conversation led to HP's acquisition of Voodoo PC, the creation of HP's gaming business unit, and HP's rise to #1 gaming PC market share, a position it has held for years. The HP Blackbird that resulted earned PC gamers' highest score ever reported, and it got a 9.3 from CNET. But more importantly, I've used this same methodology to identify breakthrough opportunities across multiple companies and organizations over the past decades. The framework is repeatable, it's teachable, and it works. The difference between breakthrough innovations and everyone else isn't intelligence or access to information. It's thinking resolution, the cognitive ability to process multiple layers of information simultaneously, while others get stuck examining only the surface. But before we dive into the framework, let me show you why this has become so absolutely critical. We're living through what I call a thinking recession. Despite having access to more information than ever before, our cognitive resolution is actually decreasing. We are becoming much more superficial. Now here's a starting statistic. The average executive processes over 34 gigabytes of information daily, but misses 73% of the strategic signals embedded in that data. All that noise. We're drowning information while we are starving for insight. Watch any leadership meeting and you'll see all the symptoms. Binary thinking applied to complex situations, yes or no. Focus on systems instead of root causes. Symptoms will be that cloud that dissuades. Poor synthesis of multiple data streams, getting all this data from multiple sources, and over-reliance on frameworks that miss critical edge cases. Now, pause here and ask yourself, how many potential opportunities did you miss last week simply because you processed them as routine information instead of strategic signals? Consider Kodak, a company that literally invented the first digital camera, owned the patents on digital, owned the patents on photography, and dominated the market. They thought about digital photography in low resolution, seeing it as a threat to film rather than recognizing how convenience, quality improvements over time, Moore's Law, and social sharing behaviors would converge to create an entirely new market. Meanwhile, Instagram, a company that didn't even exist yet, was destined to process the same signals with enhanced clarity. They understood that digital photography wasn't about replacing film. It was about transforming social connection through visual storytelling. This pattern repeats constantly, and the stakes keep getting higher and higher and higher. Now, let me show you exactly how high resolution thinking worked in that airport conversation. I was traveling to San Diego with 3 other HP executives to visit a major defense contractor, basically a standard business trip. But instead of small talk, I asked the HP engineer who was traveling with us about his side project. And after some prodding, he described a PC he had built with off the charts performance. He'd been sneaking parts from the parts bin, sneaking motherboard customizations into the production runs, and conducting unauthorized R&D on his own time. Now, here's where thinking resolution made the difference. Now, the standard resolution capture would be, an HP engineer built a super fast PC. High resolution capture would have been, an internal stealth project. We're talking to a defense contractor about some technologies that could impact our PC business. We could talk about performance optimization, and we're talking about unauthorized innovation driven by a personal need or market demand. Another way to think about this is standard resolution processing would have been, okay, we built a faster PC, so let's go into a gaming opportunity. High resolution processing would have been, multiple pattern vectors converging, computing power trajectory hitting the gaming demand, able to meet that at a very, very high end. Defense-grade performance concepts moving into consumer markets, and enthusiast communities forming through the internet connections at that time. Keep in mind, this was 05 and 06. Standard resolution would be, okay, we got a high-speed PC. Let's go into the gaming world. Let's build gaming PCs. High resolution compression would have been, let's acquire existing excellence rather than build from scratch. Let's preserve innovation culture with whatever we bring in while scaling and taking advantage of HP's distribution and manufacturing. And let's create a gaming ecosystem, not just a single gaming product. The 3 other executives processed the same information, but missed the pattern convergence that would have reshaped the entire computing industry. So, let me show you how the systematic solution, high resolution thinking, operates through 3 distinct stages. And here's the key insight: each stage amplifies the others exponentially. Stage 1, capture. Most people process conversations at kind of service level, missing 90% of the strategic signals embedded in everyday discussion, whether that's on a Zoom call, face-to-face, phone call, emails. We throw away 90% of it when it actually contains strategic signals. Now, this stage trains you to simultaneously examine multiple layers of reality, from obvious statements to hidden patterns to emerging trends. So you extract breakthrough insights from information others dismiss as routine. Stage 2 is process. While others analyze single trends in isolation, advanced thinkers recognize that breakthrough opportunities emerge where multiple patterns converge. You learn to track pattern vectors across different scales, time frames, then identify the intersection points where small insights become massive market opportunities. And then stage 3 is compress. Even brilliant insights die if they can't drive action, which is why 89% of strategic observations never get implemented. This stage teaches you to package complex discoveries into forms that bypass cognitive resistance and creates inevitable decisions rather than ignored recommendations. Now, here's what's fascinating. Most people get stuck in stage 1. They either only see surface information, nothing that triggers an action, or they get overwhelmed by the details. Advanced thinkers master all 3 stages systematically, and that's when breakthrough insights become predictable rather than lucky. The companies dominating their industries have leaders who excel at all three stages. The ones struggling usually excel at only one and maybe two. Now, let me break down each stage with specific methods you can practice and apply immediately today, soon as you in watching this video. So stage one. Stage one trains you to see what competitors overlook by processing information through multiple layers simultaneously. Most people process conversations at the surface level, and they miss the vast majority of any embedded signals in those everyday discussions. But we're going to teach you, I'm going to share with you how to extract game-changing insights from information others dismiss as routine. So let me break these down. There's three methods. Method number one is multi-layer observation. Most people either see the big picture or get lost in the details, but advanced innovators process both simultaneously along with emerging signals and missing context. This systematic scanning technique operates through four distinct lenses, ensuring you never overlook critical information that competitors dismiss as irrelevant. So first is the surface layer, what everyone sees. It's kind of the obvious that's out there. Second one, pattern layer. What connects and repeats? What's the structure? How are things interrelated? The third is the signal layer. What's emerging or changing? What trends can I pick up on? And the fourth one is the context layer. What's missing or assumed? What's the invisible? There's all these, assumptions and rules that kind of operate that are behind below. You don't really verbalize them. Ask yourself what's missing. Now, in the HP example, the surface layer was engineer built a fast PC. The pattern layer was our upcoming defense contractor visit revealing performance vectors beyond consumer markets. The signal layer was stealth projects suggesting broader unmet demand. And the context layer was our official roadmap, missing performance enthusiasts willing to pay the premium. Okay, what's method number two, which is signal versus noise? You're getting a lot of information. How do you determine the signal from the noise? Information abundance has made signal detection a critical skill, as most people collect data randomly and hope just patterns emerge. Advanced thinkers use systematic filters to distinguish information that predicts and explains from information that distracts and misleads, dramatically improving decision quality while reducing cognitive overload. So what are these? Well, one is what we call high signal, information that predicts, explains, or changes decisions. Those are the ones that just kind of like 2x4 in the side of the head. What's a medium signal? Information that provides context or confirmation. What about noise? Noise is information that distracts or misleads. Now, in this case, the stealth project that I discovered in this discussion with this one engineer was high signal. It indicated unmet market demand worth risking his career for. Think about it. He's telling the CTO he's stealing parts and misusing resources in the form of production runs. That's putting your career at risk. Technical details were medium signal, all the things to make it work. The official job duties were noise. And that's how you figure it out. When you're getting information, you got to put it into these buckets. Now, what's method number three? Edge case hunting. Now, again, you're looking about gathering information still. So, while most companies focus on serving their mainstream customers better, edge cases often contain the most valuable insights about where entire markets are heading. By systematically studying outliers, boundary conditions, and exceptions to conventional wisdom, you'll identify game-changing opportunities before they become obvious to your competition. So, how do you find these? Well, one is asking extreme questions. What happens if this opportunity scales 10x? Well, what happens if it shrinks 10x? What are the boundary conditions? Where do the rules stop working? Were the rules for maybe how HP could serve that? What are some failed examples? What can unsuccessful cases teach us? When have we tried something and it didn't work? And then outliers. Who succeeds despite breaking conventional wisdom? And then the stress test. How does this hold up under pressure? Does the math work? This is kind of the area that lines up with the conversation that I shared in my meeting with Dr. Bose Stereos, Bose Corporation. If you haven't listened to that episode, hop on over and watch that. How does this hold up under pressure? Is this going to work long term? Now, the gaming enthusiasts building high performance PCs weren't an exception to ignore. They were leading indicators of a massive market transformation. So ask yourself, think about your organization's recent decisions. How many potential opportunities might you have missed simply because you process that information as routine instead of applying these 3 methods to capture systematically? Okay, so that's stage number 1. Stage number 2 is now process it. You got all this information. What are you going to do with it? So, my raw observations are just data points. So, stage 2 is where game-changing observations and opportunities emerge. When you recognize that the real insights come from pattern convergence, where multiple trends intersect to create unexpected amplifications or reveal hidden secrets. Here's a critical insight. While competitors analyze single threads in isolation, advanced innovators focus on pattern convergence, where multiple trends intersect to create unexpected opportunities. So let me give you 3 methods for processing these connections systematically. So method number 1, multi-resolution systems analysis. Now it sounds complex and it sounds like you're going to get a bunch of math. You're not, trust me. It's unlike standard systems thinking that maps static relationships. This approach operates like dynamic zoom lens that simultaneously analyzes macro industry focuses, meso market dynamics, and micro individual interactions. You'll learn to identify temporal bridges, how today's micro decisions aggregate into tomorrow's macro realities, giving you predictive insights into market transformations before they become visible to others. And then you've got macro resolution. So macro resolution, what is it? Industry forces and ecosystem trends. It's kind of a 5 to 10 year view. Meso or middle resolution, market dynamics and organizational patterns, kind of in that 1 to 3 years. And then you get the micro resolution, individual interactions and tactical decisions, the real time view. And then you've got temporal bridges. Temporal bridges, the bridging of time, how micro actions aggregate to macro outcomes over time. Now challenge yourself right now. Take that conversation you thought of earlier. Can you process it in all 4 resolution levels? What's happening today? What's happening in the midterm? What's happening in the long term? And what is it that bridges? What's that temporal bridge across? What industry forces are creating the frustration they mentioned? Whether that be a customer, your sales force, whoever it is you had the conversation with. What market dynamics make their side project relevant? How might their individual innovation predict broader transformation? So, for HP Gaming, the macro showed computing and entertainment converging as major industry forces. Meso, the middle resolution, revealed gaming enthusiasts as underserved segments with growing purchasing power. In the micro, you captured one engineer stealth project as a demand signal for within our own organization. In the temporal bridge, connected individual unauthorized innovation to ecosystem transformation happening industry-wide. Kind of interesting, huh? You get to look at it across that timeline. The near term, the immediate, the 1 to 3, 5 to 10. Method number 2, the vector pattern recognition. Now, most people see static patterns like, ooh, gaming is popular, but miss the critical vectors such as direction and how fast is this change happening? And what's the overall momentum that determines when patterns are heading? This technique teaches you to process patterns with movement data, tracking acceleration, cross-domain transfer, and collision points, so you can predict convergence opportunities before they become obvious to the market. So, for instance, pattern direction. Is this a pattern strengthening or weakening over time? Pattern velocity. How fast is the change happening? And is it accelerating? Meaning, is it doubling every 5 years to doubling every 3 years to doubling every 2 years? What's that velocity? The pattern transfer. How does this pattern migrate between domains or industries? And then pattern collision. What happens when conflicting patterns meet or converge? In 2005, multiple vectors were converging. Gaming performance requirements were accelerating. Computing power following Moore's Law was continuing on its march. Consumer willingness to pay premiums was increasing. And enthusiast communities growing through internet connections and forums and online gaming. That collision point would create a massive new market category, one that we took advantage of, and one in which HP became the number one provider for many, 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 many years. Method number 3, interference pattern analysis. While standard approaches analyze individual trends separately, game-changing insights emerge from interference patterns, where multiple trends overlap to create constructive amplification or destructive cancellation. This advanced technique focuses on convergence zones where separate patterns intersect to create literally entirely new phenomena that don't exist in any single trend alone. What about pattern supposition? How do you multiply trends layering over each other? And what about constructive interference, where trends amplify each other unexpectedly? Or destructive interference, where trends cancel each other out? You think you're watching this trend, but you don't see this trend come over, whether it be, government regulation or supply chain, and it totally wipes out all of your planning in the process. Here's your breakthrough moment. In the case of HP Gaming, we were emerging from constructive convergence between computing performance, gaming market growth, enthusiast community formation, and direct-to-consumer distribution capabilities. Each trend alone was interesting. Their intersection created a billion-dollar market category, multi-billion-dollar market category today. But here's what separates good analysis from breakthrough innovation. You need to compress those insights into action, and that's where most brilliant observations die. So, how do we do that? Now we reach that stage where we have to take that and where most insights die and compress it, summarize it, compare that, and come up with the idea. Now, even the most sophisticated understanding of market patterns is worthless if you can't drive action, which is why so many strategic observations never get implemented, because they trigger resistance instead of recognition. Here's the brutal truth. Most strategic insights never get implemented because they trigger resistance instead of recognition. The difference between advanced innovators and everybody else isn't just what they see, it's how they package what they see. So method 1, the insight compression engine. Standard approaches dump conclusions on people and hope they accept them, which triggers resistance instead of recognition. Advanced compression works like a key designed for specific mental locks, using cognitive hooks and strategic storytelling that exploit existing beliefs. Mental proof that triggers acceptance, and action triggers that make next steps feel inevitable rather than optional. Then you talk about the cognitive hook. Exploits existing mental models for instant recognition. That's why you hear from VCs, oh, we are like Uber, but food for food. We are like X, but X plus Y. And then proof compression, minimum viable evidence that triggers belief. You don't need a big long presentation. You can do it simply by what's that minimum viable evidence that triggers the belief. And then the action trigger. What makes the next step feel inevitable rather than optional? And then replication code ensures that insight spreads naturally to others. Now think about this. For HP Gaming, I did not present a 40-slide market analysis to the other senior executives. The cognitive hook was, look, our own engineers are willing to risk their jobs to build what the market wants. That connected to the existing belief about HP's engineering excellence and made the insight feel like discovering something we already knew. Okay, now what about method number 2? Temporal compression. Human brains are terrible at imagining future consequences, but excellent at choosing between clearly presented options, which is why most strategic insights fail to drive action. This method compresses time itself, showing decision makers multiple future scenarios simultaneously in the specific decision paths that lead to each outcome, making future consequences feel immediate and real. For instance, present state compression, current reality expressed in its sharpest form, particularly if you've got competitors who maybe have already early entered a market segment, is a great present state point. Trajectory compression, where current paths are leading without innovation. Look, that market is leaving and it's going to leave us behind. How about intervention points? Specific moments when decisions change everything. And then future state comparison, side-by-side comparison views of possible outcomes. That is what this is one method that I have used probably 65% of all of my presentations to get people to take action. Now, there's another method just to have it in your quiver, and that's network compression strategy. Now, while standard approaches try to convince one person at a time, advanced compression designs insights that naturally propagate through influence networks, creating cascade effects that amplify far beyond. In many cases, you need to convince more than one person. You need to convince a network of people, and you've got to influence that network. In this case, you need to map the network topology, design message variants for different network positions. Am I presenting to someone who's head of strategy and the chief financial officer and the deep technologist? You need to create the variants of the message and create reinforcement loops that make early adopters want to spread your insights organically. You want to get them so excited, they're carrying your water, they're carrying your message. So how do you do that? Well, one is mapping the technology itself, the topology. Who influences whom in the decision ecosystem? And then you got to design for the influence pathway. How should that insight flow through the network? And then what about message mutation? How should the insight adapt as it spreads? Or should it? Do you want it has to be critical to stay? Or do you let others kind of take ownership of it and adjust and modify it themselves? And then the reinforcement loop creation. How do early adopters amplify the insight? The one way that I do this quite regularly is to give others credit. Let them claim that they've contributed it, that part of this is their idea, even if they haven't contributed anything. But here's some critical insight. Your breakthrough observation means nothing until it becomes somebody else's inevitable decision. You got to get to that decision point. Now, here's how you master this framework systematically. We've gone through a lot of this, and by the way, all of this will be in the show notes over on killerinnovations.com, and you can get it all written out. And if people are keenly interested in it, I will blow this out and create a much more in-depth document. Let me know, okay? But here's how how do you master this framework systematically? This is the exact systematic approach I used in that airport conversation with the HP engineer, turning a casual exchange into $1 billion opportunity. I call it the HP method because it replicates the process that generated $1 billion results, more than $1 billion nowadays, and is designed to train your pattern recognition in real-world conditions. This isn't theoretical. I've used this approach to identify game-changing opportunities across multiple companies for multiple decades. So here's the challenge. For the next week, have your version of the airport conversations with people within your network. Doesn't have to be only within your organization. It could be customers, your suppliers, whatever. But if you're going to approach them with a systematic intent, your target, choose 5 to 7 people strategically. Colleagues from different departments who see different angles. Engineers, salespeople, customer service, who interact with market reality daily. People from adjacent industries who might reveal transfer opportunities. Anyone working on side projects or experiments. These are your gold mines. You got to go find them. They're not going to volunteer. The questions now are what changes everything. So here are some of the questions. So, what are you working on that your team doesn't know about? That was the question I asked that particular engineer at HP. Another question. What would you build if you could sneak the resources to do it? Another is, what frustrates you enough that you'd risk working on it unauthorized? And what have you figured out that others in your field haven't? What is it that your unique perspective has? So here's the systematic approach, applying 4-layer observations to every response. So the service layer, what they literally said. Resist stopping here. You ask the question, they answer. That's the surface layer. The pattern layer, what this connects to or repeats across conversations. You're talking to 5 to 7 people and you hear 3 or 4 people with the exact same comment. That tells you that there's some connection, there's some repeating going on. And then what about the signal level? What's emerging or changing in their responses? When you have your response with the first person, that changes how you interact with the second person because you are connecting the dots to the first person. What's emerging or changing as you're continuing through the conversation? And then what's the context layer? So what's missing or assumed in their thinking? Could be not a big enough market. Our designs aren't appropriate. Whatever it is, right? What's missing? Or what's the assumption your organization or industry has in place that you need to go break? Now, the key here is document everything. Don't just capture the obvious. Record the context, their motivations, the broader patterns you're noticing, and your observations at all 4 layers. Success indicators. By week's end, you should have discovered at least 3 stealth projects or unauthorized innovations. You've identified 2, maybe 3 frustrations that point to market gaps people care enough about to risk addressing personally. You've also maybe found signals that others in your organization or industry are completely missing. And you've documented observations at all 4 layers, not just the surface layer. Now, what you're hunting for? The same signals I found in that airport conversation. Internal innovation happening outside official channels, unmet demands your organization isn't addressing, that people care enough about risk pursuing, capabilities that could transfer between domains, and problems people are solving individually that could scale exponentially. This exercise should reveal at least one hidden opportunity that wasn't obvious before you started. And more importantly, you'll have practiced the complete methodology that makes game-changing insights predictable. Share your discoveries with your team. You might be surprised by what patterns emerge when you compare notes. Now, before we wrap up, let me save you from the 3 biggest mistakes people make when starting. Mistake number 1, trying to process everything at high resolution. You're going to burn out in a week. Start selective. Choose the most important conversations and situations where stakes are high. Mistake number 2, getting overwhelmed by details instead of focusing on patterns. Remember, the goal isn't collecting the most information. It's seeing connections others miss. Mistake number 3, stopping at insights without compression. I've seen brilliant analysts generate breakthrough observations that die in PowerPoint presentations because they couldn't compress them into action. Now, here's a bonus insight. The most common failure point is trying to convince people with logic instead of connecting it to their existing beliefs. Work within human psychology, not against it. Now, the benefits of high-resolution thinking compounds exponentially. What starts as a better decision-making evolves into innovation intuition, the ability to sense opportunities before they fully form. Now, here's a statistic that should motivate you. Companies with leaders who excel at high-resolution thinking outperform their peers by 34% in revenue growth and 67% in innovation metrics. This isn't just about personal advancement. It's about organizational survival. But here's what really changes. You're going to develop a reputation for seeing around corners. Organizations start routing their most complex challenges through high-resolution thinkers because they've learned to trust the results. That airport conversation 20 years ago was not luck. It was a result of systematically training myself to process multiple layers of information simultaneously, recognize the patterns across domains, and then compress that complexity into actionable insights. Now, if you want the behind-the-scenes story of what it actually felt like to develop this capability, the emotional journey, the internal doubts, the personal transformation that comes with seeing the world differently, that's what I dive into on Monday in my Substack over in Studio Notes, and also the history of all of my findings and self-doubts, lessons learned, scars I publish every Monday in Studio Notes publication, my posting over on Substack. It's where I share vulnerable human side of making billion-dollar innovation decisions, both good ones and bad ones, that you won't find anywhere else. But here's what matters most. High-resolution thinking without action is just sophisticated procrastination. The methodology only creates value if you use it to identify and act on opportunities others are missing. Now, your homework starts now. Pick one person, ask about their stealth project, apply the 4-layer observation method, and document what you discover. Then share this framework with someone who needs to hear it. Every team needs at least one person thinking in high resolution. Everything else builds from there. What conversation are you having tomorrow that could change everything? The difference between seeing it and missing it is not luck. It's not intelligence or not the access of information. It's resolution. So hit subscribe and hit that like button if this framework opens your eyes to possibilities you hadn't seen before. And if you're interested in helping us put out more content like this, become a paid subscriber over on Studio Notes, over on Substack. Links will be in below in the description or over in the show notes. Now, let me be clear on this. All funds are used to simply cover our cost to produce the content. None of it comes to me. This is not about me getting paid for anything. It's to cover the cost of the team behind the scenes that help produce the videos and does the research, etc. So none of it comes to me. But if you are interested in helping us so that we can continue to produce content like this, then consider becoming a paid subscriber. And remember, the organizations that upgrade their collective thinking resolution first will capture the opportunities everybody else misses. So, step 1, share this episode with your team. Start that transformation today. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.